So number 1 says Cameron gets $7 per week as allowance. Write an equation to find the amount of allowance A Cameron receives in any number of weeks, W. So guys, they gave you what variables they want you to use. They want you to use A and they want you to use W. Okay, and they gave you the rate. Guys, this is just like what you were doing with your function project. This was a proportional problem here. What would our equation look like for this one? Kylie? A equals 7W. Very good. It says $7 per week. You always look at whatever the per something is, and that tells you what you're multiplying it by. We're taking 7 times W, and that gives us the amount of money or the allowance. Good. Okay. You want to make sure you have your equation correct because the equation is what helps you with the next 2 parts. All right. Then it says make a table to find the amount of allowance Cameron receives for 5, 6, 7, or 8 weeks. Graph the ordered pairs. When you are doing this, okay, when you are looking at it, 5, 6, 7, or 8, those numbers are already given to you, but I also had some students that weren't paying attention to that on the quiz, and they just thought it was 1, 2, 3, 4. So make sure you're really paying attention to what numbers they want you to plug in. Now, I have part of this already done, because otherwise it takes way too long to go over this in class. So some of the problems are done. Some of the ones that people struggle with the most, I have us having to fill those parts in. Okay. So this was just doing 7 times 5 gave me 35. 6 times 7 gave me 42. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 7 is 56. Then you fill in the graph. On the graph, you have to label your axis, your X and Y axis. The first column is always which one, X or Y? So you might even want to write that in. That's X, that's Y. So that's where my weeks went down here and my allowance went here. Your points might look a little bit different than mine if you counted differently. Down here I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Here I was counting 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on. I've had some people that use this as their counting for their Y, because if you start counting 7, 14, 21, and so on, you're going to get these are going to be right on the line then. So it's kind of up to you. So your points might look a little different than mine from here. Okay? But the next part is it continuous or discrete? And a lot of people have trouble with deciding this. Continuous. Continuous can be what types of numbers? Good. So I want everybody to write that in as a little hint for while you're studying. Can be decimals or fractions. What about discrete? Discrete has to be whole numbers. When you're trying to decide continuous or discrete, are we looking at all of the numbers in the table, only one of the columns? Where do we look to decide continuous or discrete? Is Kylie the only one that knows? Leslie. The X, very good. You're always looking in your X column here, okay? So what I want you to think about is, yes, there are no decimals here, but we're thinking, could there be decimals? So if you think about the story problem, it's that Cameron is getting $7 per week as an allowance. Okay, if any of you get an allowance, or maybe if you imagined what it would be like to get an allowance, if you don't, okay, is it that at any given time in the week, you can be like, I want my allowance now, and they give you a portion of the allowance. Like maybe each day they give you $1.25 until we get to that $7. Or is it they give it to you once a week? How would your parents possibly give you an allowance? Do you think they give you the little bit amount each day? Or if you get $7 per week, are you getting $7 at one point in the week? 1 point in the week, right? Okay? They're not going to be like, here's 75 cents today, here's 75 cents tomorrow, here's 75 cents the next day, or even what if you ask partway through the day? They're not going to give you, okay, well, we're this far through the day, so here's 35 cents. If you ask me in another 30 minutes, you'll get another nickel. Okay? They're not going to do that. You get paid once a day. So, in this case, is it going to be continuous or discrete? Discrete. This one is discrete, and the reason is because he gets paid by the whole weeks. And on this one, I should have had a capital D there. I decided to make it a full sentence at the end, so sorry about that. Okay. Now, don't forget, continuous or discrete then tells you if you should have a line or not. If it's discrete, should there be a line on our graph? No. So this means that there is no line if it is discrete. Okay? Next part is independent and dependent. And again, a lot of people tend to struggle with this, but you got to remember you practice this a lot as you were making your presentation and as you were listening to presentations. This is the part where it said blank depends on blank. The first blank was always the dependent, because it says blank depends on, and then you name the independent. When you think of it, independent and dependent, if you're going blank depends, the dependent, which one is that? Is that the x or the y value? Blank depends on the other one. So like when you were coming up with yours, okay, if your rate was cost per item or pens per day, your dependent was always your, Jade, y value, where your independent is your x value. Guys, your independent, that is your input. Remember, I made a big deal about talking about that as we were learning about it. I would write those hints down if I were you. Independent is your input. That's your x value. So, Hallie, my x value, my independent, was what in this story problem? Weeks. Aubrey, my dependent was allowance. Very good. Are there any questions on that first section? Specifically, these two parts are where people tend to miss. No? Okay. The next part I have done for you. I do want you to really pay attention to the fact that it says express the relation as a table and graph, then state the domain and range. The people on the quiz that were doing the domain and range first did the domain and range, and then they had these numbers wrong, because remember, for the domain and range, and you can always write these in if you've forgotten, we want least to greatest and don't repeat. Least to greatest and don't repeat. So, domain is your x values, but you're putting them in order, least to greatest. So, -4, 0, 2, and 3. Your y values for all of them, but again, least to greatest, -4, -3, -1, 0. So I had some people that were filling their table in then as -4, -4, and 0, -3. No, 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 do not do that. Okay? It should be going in the table exactly how you are seeing it here. So 3, -4, 2, 0, -4, -1, 0, -3. Okay, and that's how you're graphing it too then. 3, -4, 2, 0, -4, -1, 0, -3. Any questions on domain, range, graphing it, table? Yes. Yes, the lines will be better. I made these copies and then I caught it before I made my tests. So they're already printed. They're a lot better on this. The last ones, these are definitely more difficult than the ones I have on the test because these, they needed you to do by half, okay? Because they did every 2 lines was 1 as you were counting them. So these were definitely more difficult with decimals. So this was, you went back 1.5, up a half. So negative 1.5, 0.5. This was, you went forward 1, up 1.5. So 1, 1.5. You went back 1, down 1.5, negative 1, negative 1.5. This was you went forward 2, up 1, 2, 1. Any questions? First page. No? Okay, and again, tomorrow will not be decimals. Okay, they'll be all integers. All right, turn the page. You guys did really well on the function part of the quiz. It's just a matter of plugging in whatever it says. So if this says f of 6, you're plugging 6 in for x. 4 times 6 gave us 24. If it's f of 8 here, I'm plugging in 8 for x. So 8 plus 11 gave me 19. This one was f of 3, so I plugged 3 in for x. 2 times 3 plus 4 gave me 10. Any questions there? Okay, same thing on the next one. You guys did really well on this part on the quiz. They give you the function. They give you the x values. You have to show the work. Show what your f of x will be at the end. So basically, what is your y at the end? And then domain and range. Remember, just like on the other side, my domain is my x value, my range is my y value. So this is coming from here. This is coming from here. It's the same rules as the other sides. We put on those braces, we put them in order, least to greatest. We don't repeat numbers if they show up more than once, okay? So 9 times negative 1 is negative 1. 9 times 0 is 0. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 2 was 18. On 11, this one you had to make sure you were typing it in correctly. You really wanted to make sure you were using parentheses. 2 minus 3 times negative 1 is 5. 2 minus 3 times 0 is 2. 2 minus 3 times 1 is negative 1. 2 minus 3 times 2 is negative 4. On this one, you did have to remember that this went highest to lowest. So when you wrote it out, you had to write it out almost backwards. Negative 4, negative 1, 2, 5 for the range here. Any questions so far on this page? Okay, now starts the part that people tend to make mistakes on. All right. So when we're looking at this, it says, Joanna's monthly cost of sending text messages can be represented by the function y equals 0.05x, where y represents the total cost and x represents the number of text messages. The table shows Peggy's monthly cost of sending text messages. Which statement is not true? First of all, I want you to box the word not. Okay? That means we're looking for something that is false. I always have someone that misses the word not and finds the first correct answer and they're like, yep, that's it, and doesn't check any other answer. Okay? So make sure you're really paying attention to that says not. Now, this is a multiple choice question. However, if you do not show the work, you are not going to get credit for it. All right, I got to see the work, so I know that you didn't just randomly pick one of these and guess. Okay, I like to use highlighters here, and I like to use highlighters purely because you have 2 names, 2 sections, you have a lot going on here. I like to highlight, okay, Joanna's was this equation, and Peggy's, it said, came from the table. Now, you don't have to do that at all, but I just find it helps me keep things organized better. So tomorrow on the test, if you want to use, can you grab that for me? It just went on the other side of my desk there. If you want to use, thank you very much, highlighters, you don't even have to ask. You can just get them out. Even if you're in the middle of your test and you're like, oh, I want to get a highlighter out, just grab one. Okay? So at this point, Joanna's is the easiest to do because we need our M and our B, and we have an equation. We know that equations go in y equals mx plus b form. So what is my rate of change for Joanna? Braden, what's my rate of change?
0.05.
Okay, but Braden, we always put labels for a rate of change. So 0.05, what per what?
Cents per message.
Okay, now I'm not going to put cents, because if I put that, that says 5/100ths of a penny. So I'm not going to put cents, I'm going to put, yeah, because that tells me then that that was 5 cents, okay? And it was per message. What was my B value on this one, Sophia? If you look at the formula or the equation here, what's my B value? 0. There is no B value. It's not plus anything at the end, so that means we were adding on nothing. Perfect. For Peggy's then, Peggy's is a little bit more complicated. They didn't give us the equation, so we have to figure out these numbers from the table. We have done this so many times. We did it in our last project for the function project. You guys actually did this in your slope art project. We have done this in multiple lessons throughout the last 2 chapters as well. For our M, that's our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Aubrey, what's my y2 minus y1? Jade, x2 minus x1.
40 minus 30.
She used 11 and 10, so you got to use the same.
No, 30 and...
Good. And so Kylie, 11 minus 10 is? And 30 minus 20? And guys, because I have this one as a decimal, and it's money, I want to write this one as a decimal. So what would that be? How do you change that into a decimal? What do you do with a fraction? Divide. So what did you have, Leslie? Good. It's 0.1. Since it's money, we're going to add in a 0 at the end, so we know it's 10 cents. So 10 cents per message. Very good. Okay. We do not have the initial value given to us, so we have to find that. If we do y equals mx plus b, we just had our m value as 0.1. And if I go back, this is an x value, this is a y value. We just used these up here. So my y is 10. My x is 20, and now I can solve for my b value. What is 0.1 times 20? Anybody? 2. Zofia, how do I move that 2 to the other side? Subtracts. And so b is, anyone? 8. Okay. Any questions on the work? Now, we haven't actually answered the question yet. We have to do the multiple choice part. So it says Peggy's initial cost, that's initial value, is greater than Joanna's initial cost. So if I look at these two, is Peggy's larger than Joanna's? Yes or no? Yes. So do we want to mark that one as our answer? No, because we're looking for something that's false. So that one does not work because we want it to be not true, and that one is true. Okay, the next one says Peggy pays more per text. Well, here's what Peggy pays. Here's what Joanna pays. Does she pay more per text? Yes, so that one's not it. Next one says Joanna pays $7.50 for 150 text messages. Well, let's see, 150 times how much does she pay per text? How much? 5 cents. Okay, and do we have a begin value that we have to add on? Nope, so that's it. So is that $7.50? Yep, so that one shouldn't work. So hopefully D is the false parts. So if we look at the last one, Peggy pays $20 for sending 150. So if I do 150 this time, it's times how much for each? 10 cents. And do we have an amount that we have to add on? What is it? Plus the 8 for the initial value. Did that give me 20? No. So that's the one that's not true. It should have been $23, not $20. Are there any questions on that one? Okay, flip it over. The next three are very similar to it, okay? So from here it says, Tom and Lisa each spent the afternoon biking on a neighborhood trail. The distance y Tom traveled can be represented by the function y equals 11x. So Tom was this equation. The graph shows that Lisa's distance, and we need to compare their speeds. So once again, you don't have to use highlighters, but I think it helps me keep things straight so that I don't actually switch around answers. So if I'm looking at this equation, y equals 11x, what was Tom's speed? 11 what? It's a rate. Good. 11 miles per hour. And this was really hard to read for the miles, so if you catch that tomorrow where you can't quite read it because of the way it printed, come up and ask me and I'd be more than happy to help you with the labels there. Okay? For Lisa's speed, they didn't give it to us, so we have to figure it out. Well, anytime we're doing this, we're always doing what over what. Like here, this was really what over what? Y over x. Raise your hand if you can tell me a point on the graph where we can read exactly where the y and the x is. Jade?
24 and 3.
So 24 is my y value, 3 is my x value, so 24 over 3. What is 24 divided by 3, Braden? So Lisa should be 8.
Miles per hour.
Good. 8 miles per hour. Well, they asked you to compare them. What could we say to compare them? Hold on. Raise your hand. Go ahead. It's not that he travels farther. Sophia? Yeah, it's speed, right? Okay, so he's traveling faster. Okay, I put Tom bikes at a faster rate. And then I just added in that 11 is greater than 8. Okay, any questions on that one? Number 14, Trey starts with a certain number of baseball cards and plans to collect 8 each month. At the end of the year, he has 109 cards. Assume the relationship is linear, so it's going to be a y equals mx plus b form. Find and interpret the rate of change and the initial value. Well, guys, they gave us the rates. What did they give us as the rate? Kylie? 8 cards per month. Very good. So they gave us 8 cards per month. Now, for the b value, they didn't give it to us. We have to solve for it. And so remember, we do y equals mx plus b. Aubrey, what did we just have as our m? Okay. And our x and our y come from in the story problem. Well, I see 109 cards and I see a year. We're not using years, though. We're talking months. So what number, Hallie, would we really be plugging in for months? 12, right? Very good. Now, the important part here is you have to know which one is which. So you guys told me we always do what over what? Y over x. That means cards is my y, so 109 is my y. And months is my x. That's my 12. So now I can solve for b. Leslie, 8 times 12 is? Good. from there, when I solve, what do I have to do, Kylie? And I end up with b is equal to anyone? So if I have to write my function here, my function would look like what, Zofia? Perfect. Y equals 8x plus 13. Then it does ask me to interpret. Interpret means I want sentences about what this 8 is talking about and what this 13 is talking about. What word do we always use for B to help us remember? Begin. Okay? So we're saying Trey begins with 13 cards. Good. What happens then? Then he adds 8 cards per month. Very good. Any questions there? Okay, I got to start talking a lot faster. I've apparently been going a little bit slow on some of these. Okay. So on this one, it says the total cost of renting a carpet cleaner for Carpets Inc. is represented by the function y equals 20x plus 15. So Carpets Inc. is this equation where x represents the numbers of days and y represents the total cost. The cost of renting carpet cleaner from Clark's Cleaners is shown in the table. I like to go through and do one entire company at a time. So like on this one, rate of change. Rate of change is what letter, M or B? M. So if I look at this for Carpets Inc., and I think y equals mx plus b, Aubrey, what's my M? What's my rate of change? 20. And it would be 20 what per what? What are we talking about? Shh. Per. Very good. Right here, dollars and days is what we're talking about. $20 per day. Good. Then it says it wants to talk about the initial value. Hallie, what was my initial value in that equation? What was my initial value in that equation? In this equation? Initial value. I feel like you've said both numbers, so tell me which one you feel certain about. 15, very good. Initial value is like your B value, okay? So that means, because it says interpret, I want sentences. So you start by paying $15. You start by paying $15. Then at the end, part C says, how much will it cost for you to rent the carpet cleaner for 6 days? Well, if the function is y equals 20x plus 15, and I plug in 6, 20 times 6 is? 20 times 6 is? 120 plus 15 is? $135. Very good. For this part of it, Clark's Cleaners, I have to use my table. I'm just going to say this to make it go a little bit quicker. So I'm doing my y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when I do that, I get 25 over 1. That means the rate is $25 per day. If I go to find my B value here, my M was 25. And then if I look back here, I had an x of 2 and a y of 60. So if I plug that in to my equation and I solve for B, 25 times 2 is 50. So I have 60 equals 50 plus B. If I subtract 50 on both sides, that means my B value will be 10. So for this company, I begin by paying $10. So if I'm looking at this, My rate is $25 per day, so I'm going to pay $25 for the 6 days, and I have to begin by paying $10 just when I sign on. So when I do that, I end up with $160. So which company has the better price? Which one? Carpets Inc. Any questions on that one? Okay, and again, all of this is written out on the one I already have posted on Google Classroom, so feel free to look at that if you're not quite there yet on these. On the next page, it says, determine whether the table represents linear or nonlinear functions. Guys, I want you to box the word linear. Linear means there is a constant, what? Good, rate of change. So we have to see if there's a constant rate of change on these. So 8 to 12, how did it change? Anybody? Plus 4, 12 to 16? Plus 4, 16 to 20? Plus 4 on the top, 1 to 2. 2 to 3? 3 to 4. On this one, Brayden, is there a constant rate of change? So Zofia, is this linear or nonlinear? Linear. I'm going to say linear, and if you didn't pay attention, it does say explain. So I'm going to say linear because the rate is always, and be careful on this, is it 1 over 4 or 4 over 1? Good, you always do y over x. The change in y was 4, the change in x was 1, is always 4 over 1. Or you could just say 4 to simplify it. Okay. On the other one, my y value, 5 to 3, 3 to 0, 0 to negative 4. On the top, 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. So, is there a constant rate of change on this one, Jade? Well, these are the same, but if I do negative 2 divided by 2, and negative 3 divided by 2, and negative 4 divided by 2, are those all the same number? No. So is this one linear or nonlinear? Good, nonlinear, because the rates are different. Because the rates are different. Okay? The next two should be very quick for you, but don't forget to explain. Part A is nonlinear. It's not a straight line. Somebody in the last class said, can I put it does not have a constant rate of change? Sure, you could also tell me it curves. Anything like that is a good explanation. Where part B is linear because it is a straight line. Okay? At the bottom, you are taking your function and you are plugging in your x values, finding your y, and then you're just graphing the points. This is a quadratic function because of the squared, so you should be making a parabola. A parabola is U-shaped. You have to remember not to curve back in to make a football. You have to put your arrows at both ends. And the biggest part is when you do your work, what do you have to remember to use? Parentheses. If it's being squared, you have to use parentheses. Okay? Any questions on that one? Okay, if you don't have that done, don't forget, it is posted on Google Classroom, so you can look at it again. This one is another quadratic function, so it's another parabola. This time it opens up down because the coefficient for the squared term is a negative number, so it's going to open down. Once again, you absolutely have to use the parentheses. Okay? And I want to get through talking about the last one for sure because a lot of people struggle with that. So does anybody have questions on anything we just went over from 16 to 19? Okay. So the last one, you really have to read it carefully to make sure you have the correct answers on this. It says, the graph represents Jenny's activities on her way home from where? From school on a given day. Match each statement with its correct corresponding segment on the graph. So it says she's starting where? School. And we're trying to get to where? Home. Good. All right, so that can kind of help us as we go through this. So if she's starting at school, which was the only sentence that had us starting at school? The last one. Jenny rides her bike from school to the park. So that would be A. That means this right here is where? The park, right? She starts at school, she went to the park. So here she must be the park. So now that we have a constant, a flat line, a horizontal line, she's not moving farther away from home, she's not moving closer to home. So that means she must have stayed there. So which sentence fits that?
Jenny plays at the park.
Yeah, Jenny plays at the park. Then, what's the next statement? She goes from the park to, yeah, here it says park to Allison's house. So right here it must be Allison's. So that was C. After that, we have another horizontal line. So which one should that be? She visits Allison at her house. So she stays at Allison's house for a little bit. And then the end one, this has to be at the end because it says now she's finally going from, right here, home. I underlined the wrong one. She bikes home from Allison's house. So here's Allison's house, here's home. That would be E. You have a very similar one on your test. So make sure you are reading the words very carefully. Any questions on anything? Okay, do not forget to study and remember that 12 through 15 are the ones that people struggle with the most. So make sure you're looking over all of those. Okay?